She dressed up ugly to ruin a blind date, but the handsome cold millionaire CEO who showed up fell hard for her. She didn't cry when the boy she loved vanished from her life like smoke. She didn't cry when her father slammed the door and told her to leave with the child in her belly. She didn't cry when she gave birth alone, wrapped in a borrowed blanket on a snowy roadside. But the first time that tiny heart pressed against her chest, the first time little fingers curled around hers, trusting her to carry them through the world, it's when she broke. Not because she was weak, but because she finally realized that she wasn't alone anymore. Thrown away at 17. Sierra Monroe was 17 when her father stopped calling her his daughter. It happened on a Thursday. The kind of cold that made car doors freeze shut and words come out in smoke. She was still wearing her marching band hoodie, shoes soaked from the slush, when she sat her parents down in the kitchen and told them she was pregnant. She expected silence. Maybe tears. She didn't expect the slap. Or the words that followed. "You want to play grown-up? Then pack your bag." Her mother didn't speak at all. Just stood behind her father with arms crossed and eyes that flicked to the floor as if maybe, if she didn't look directly at Sierra, the truth would unexist. So Sierra packed a duffel bag, a pair of jeans, a half-used journal, and the tiny stuffed raccoon she'd kept since second grade. Then she walked out into the snow. Grandma Mabel took her in without a single question. She just opened the front door of her farmhouse, held out a blanket, and whispered, "You're safe here, baby." They slept in the same room that first night, Mabel snoring softly in the rocking chair while Sierra stared at the ceiling, hand pressed to her still flat stomach. She was terrified, not of birth, not even of being alone. She was terrified of being forgotten, of raising a child who would someday ask, "Where's Grandpa? Why don't I have a daddy?" and having no answer but a shrug and a heartbreak. Jude was born in the back seat of Mabel's pickup truck on a snowy February morning. They didn't make it to the hospital in time. Sierra's water broke as they hit a patch of ice, and 20 minutes later, with shaking hands and a towel-wrapped bundle pressed to her chest, Sierra became a mother. She named him Jude because the name sounded like a song, and because even in pain, it felt like a prayer answered. The years passed in quiet rhythms. Diapers, midnight feedings, burned toast, and overdue utility bills. Jude grew like a wildfire, curious, stubborn, kind. He asked questions no one could answer. He fixed broken clocks with Lego bricks. He loved stars, puzzles, and old science documentaries. And he had Sierra's eyes. Every morning, Sierra woke up with a single promise in her heart. Whatever happens, he'll never feel abandoned. At 25, she worked double shifts at Rosie's Diner. The coffee was weak, the tips were smaller than the coins in the jukebox, but it was honest work, and it kept the lights on. Most people in town knew her story. Some whispered, some didn't. But she kept her chin up, her apron clean, and her focus on Jude, the reason she didn't fall apart completely. Then, one Monday morning in early spring, a man walked into the diner. Not just any man. He wore a charcoal coat and carried silence like armor. He sat in the corner booth, the one under the faded photo of Rosie meeting Elvis, and didn't look up. Sierra poured him coffee like she did for everyone else. But something in his eyes, cold and tired, made her pause. He looked at her like he didn't see her. Not because she wasn't worth seeing, but because he'd spent too many years trying not to be seen himself. She didn't know his name. Not yet. Didn't know he was a billionaire. Didn't know he once buried an empty casket meant for a child. Didn't know that fate, heartbreak, and one coffee spill would tie their lives together forever. She just knew he sat in her section. And when he looked up from his coffee and met her eyes, the world felt just a little less heavy. The boy with the questions. He always asked the strangest questions in the morning. That day, it was, "Mom, do you think stars ever get lonely?" Sierra blinked awake, eyes still heavy with sleep, and found her son perched at the edge of her bed, knees pulled to his chest, voice soft and serious like he wasn't 7 but 70. She smiled, even before she fully understood the question. "I think stars shine because they're waiting for someone to notice them." He seemed to accept that, nodding solemnly, and padded barefoot out of the room. She listened to his footsteps, still small but growing faster each week. There was a time she could carry him with one arm and a bag of groceries in the other. Now he built rocket ships from cardboard and asked about particle velocity like it was bedtime chatter. Sometimes she wondered how he'd become this kind of boy, sensitive and brilliant and strange in the most beautiful way, when all she'd had to give him was a second-hand childhood and the love she tried to pour into every corner of their tiny life. She sat up, rubbed her eyes, and whispered a quiet prayer to the morning. But let him always keep that light. He was already in the kitchen by the time she slipped her socks on, tinkering with the broken toaster again, eyes squinting behind a smudge of peanut butter on his cheek. There were no crumbs on the counter. He was neat, meticulous. Just tiny tools lined up like soldiers, and a half-repaired spring popping from the metal like a question mark. "I think I fixed the right side," he said proudly. She kissed the top of his head. "You fix everything." He grinned. "Except the water heater." "Let's not talk about the water heater." He snorted, and for a moment all the tiredness of early morning shifted into something lighter. By the time she pulled on her diner uniform and tied her apron, he was already packing his lunch: a banana, a peanut butter sandwich with the crusts cut off, and 2 napkins, one of which he always drew on. Today's sketch was a stick-figure astronaut planting a flag on a star labeled Jude Land. She watched him tuck it into his backpack with all the care in the world, then walked to the screen door, turning back only once. "You think the new customer will be there again today?" "Well, new customer. The one who doesn't smile." He sat in booth 4. "He looks like he builds robots." She frowned, surprised. "You noticed him?" Jude nodded. "He drank coffee. Black. He didn't check his phone. That means he's either very rich or very sad." Sierra blinked. "And which one do you think he is?" "Both." He opened the door and disappeared into the golden haze of morning. She didn't expect to see him, but booth 4 was already occupied when she stepped into the diner. He sat with his back to the window, hands clasped, a cup of black coffee untouched in front of him. He wore a suit navy, crisp, expensive, his expression unreadable. But there was something about the way he sat, as if he was balancing the weight of the world on his spine and didn't trust chairs to hold it. She approached slowly, coffee pot in hand. "Would you like a refill?" she asked. He looked up. His eyes were startling pale blue, distant, like light filtered through fog. "No, thank you," he said, voice low, almost bored, but not rude. She nodded, turned to go, then stopped. "Most people check their phones every 5 minutes. Yours hasn't buzzed once." He raised an eyebrow, not expecting that. "I'm off-grid this morning," he replied. She smiled. "Jude says that means you're either very rich or very sad." "Who's Jude?" "Son." He blinked, as if the word surprised him. "How old?" 7. Something shifted in his face. Something small. "We notices a lot for 7. Notices everything." Silence followed, but not the awkward kind, the kind that felt like a bridge waiting to be crossed. He looked back down at his coffee. She walked away. That night, she found Jude sitting on the porch, drawing again. This time it was a city floating in space, a dome over it, stars all around. "What's that one?" she asked. He grinned. "It's a place where no one gets left behind." She sat beside him and tucked a strand of hair behind his ear. "Did you ever feel like I left you behind?" He looked at her like she'd asked if the sky was red. "Mom, you're always here." She pressed a hand to her heart. Sometimes children said things that made you feel like you'd been forgiven for sins you didn't even know you'd committed. He leaned his head against her shoulder. And the stars above looked a little less lonely that night. Chapter 2. Coffee on a Billionaire. The second time it happened, she wasn't even looking. Sierra was refilling sweet tea glasses in the corner booth, her mind half focused on Jude's spelling test and half on the dinner she could barely afford to make. Mac and cheese again, maybe with a side of hope. She was tired, her feet ached. The diner was buzzing in that usual dull Midwestern hum, forks on porcelain, a radio playing old country, the jingle of the bell every time someone new walked in. She turned, balancing a tray in one hand and a coffee pot in the other, when a blur of movement crossed into her path. She swerved. Too late. Hot coffee sloshed forward, right onto someone's chest. It's not just anyone. Booth 4. He stood, barely flinching, as the dark stain spread across his pale shirt. She gasped, setting the tray down hard enough to rattle the plates. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." She grabbed napkins, fumbling, reaching for his chest and then pulling back, unsure where politeness ended and invasion began. He blinked once, then twice. Then, instead of anger, he said, "It's okay." His tone was so calm it unnerved her. He glanced down at the damage like he'd just spilled water on a report, not boiling liquid on his skin. "You should probably run it under cold water," she said quickly, heart hammering. He touched the fabric near his collar, then looked at her again. Really looked. "I'm not burned." "You could have been." "I'm not." Their eyes held for 1 second too long. She stepped back, flustered, ready to apologize again when he said, "It's not the worst thing that's happened to me this week." And that stopped her. "That week?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the napkin she was still holding, took it gently from her hand, and wiped the edge of his wrist. His movements were so precise, so controlled. "Let me grab you a cardigan," she said suddenly. "It's from the Lost and Found, but it's clean." Before he could argue, she disappeared into the back and returned with her grandfather's old cardigan, forest green, a little faded, soft at the sleeves. She used to wrap Jude in it during fevers. It still smelled like cedar and memory. He took it from her with a strange reverence, slipped it on without a word, and sat back down. For the rest of his stay, he sipped coffee slowly and stared out the window, like he was searching for something only he could see. Later that night, Sierra found herself scrubbing the stain from his shirt under the diner faucet. She didn't know why she'd asked to clean it. Maybe because she felt guilty. Maybe because she wasn't used to people being kind when things spilled. The fabric was softer than it looked. Tailored, imported. The tag said Italy. She caught her reflection in the window. Tired eyes, worn apron, hair coming loose in a way she didn't have time to fix, and wondered what it must be like to wear something so fine that even a mistake couldn't ruin it. Ethan hadn't meant to go back. He wasn't the type to repeat himself. His life was scheduled down to the minute calendars, meetings, quarterly returns. His suits were steamed, his driver always early, his coffee made precisely at 204 DFF. But something about that woman, the girl with dark hair and storm-colored eyes, had thrown him, not because she spilled on him, because she didn't shrink from him, because she didn't know who he was and treated him like someone worth helping anyway. It rattled him more than he wanted to admit. That night, Ethan stood alone in his Chicago penthouse. He poured a glass of water, sat on the edge of his bed, and opened the dry cleaning bag that now held a green cardigan, neatly folded, still warm with memory. He lifted it, smelled it, and for the first time in a decade, he didn't feel alone. He didn't feel powerful either. Just human. Back in Springfield, Jude lay curled under the covers, whispering to the dark. "Mom," he asked, "do you think people can be both broken and kind?" Sierra blinked, pulling the blanket over his shoulders. "Where'd you hear that?" "I just wondered. The robot guy, he looked like someone who lost something important." She paused. "We might have," she said. "Did we?" She brushed his hair back. "No, sweetheart, we found something. With each other." And in the corner of the room, the green cardigan, temporarily returned, hung on the chair, like a witness to something far bigger than it seemed. Chapter 3. The Second Visit. She didn't expect him to come back. People like him didn't come back. They passed through places like Springfield like wind through mesh screen doors, noticed briefly, then gone. Sierra had served enough polished men in pressed coats to know the type. They didn't return to diners where the coffee was cheap and the eggs were overcooked. But there he was. Booth 4. Same eyes, same silence. Only this time, he brought something with him, not in his hands, but in his expression. Like a decision had been made quietly, somewhere far from here, and now he'd come to carry it out. She approached slowly, unsure of what to say. Then she saw it, folded neatly beside his coffee cup. The green cardigan. Dry cleaned. Pressed. Restored. He looked up. I thought it should come back to you better than how I borrowed it. She blinked. You had it cleaned. It wasn't just a sweater. He paused, then added gently, I figured it meant something. It was my grandfather's. His nod was almost imperceptible. He must be a good man. She hesitated, then tucked it behind the counter with a care she couldn't disguise. A coffee, she offered. Please? She poured him a cup and turned to walk away. But something in her paused. You're not from here, she said over her shoulder. No, he replied, but I think I might stay a while. Jude burst through the diner door 20 minutes later. His school bus had dropped him early, and he always stopped in before class to collect his power hug, a ritual of forehead kisses, whispered affirmations, and whatever treat Sierra could sneak into his backpack that day. But this time, he stopped short. Booth 4. Cardigan man. Still here. Jude tilted his head, eyes narrowed. Then, as if making up his mind in a single breath, he marched over and slid into the booth across from him. You came back, Jude said. I did. Most people don't, Rosie said. I'm not most people. Jude grinned. I didn't think so. Ethan leaned forward. What gave me away? You don't drink your coffee. You just look at it. Ethan blinked, then smiled. You're very observant. I'm building a telescope, Jude replied proudly, from parts. Ethan looked genuinely impressed. Is it for school? No, it's for me. I'm smart. Why do you build things? Jude asked. Ethan's answer came slow, deliberate. Sometimes, but mostly I fix things that stopped working. Jude considered that. You fixa. Maybe. Jude nodded, satisfied. I think my mom is one of those too. Ethan looked toward the counter, where Sierra was pretending not to listen while wiping down menus that were already clean. She is, he said quietly. She definitely is. Later, after Ethan left and the breakfast rush faded into the lull of late morning, Sierra stepped out back for a breath of air. The spring breeze was still crisp, the kind that woke your bones but didn't hurt. She leaned against the brick wall, arms folded. She didn't hear Mabel approach until the screen door creaked. You're thinking again, Mabel said. I always think. That's the trouble. Sierra smiled. He came back. I figured he would. You don't know that? Mabel raised a brow. Child, I've seen more men come and go than coffee orders through this diner. That one? He's not done. Sierra looked down. He talked to Jude. Mabel waited. He didn't ask what Jude could do. He asked if he was happy. That quieted even Mabel. Sierra shook her head. No one's ever asked me that before, not even Jude's father. Then maybe it's time someone did. That night, Sierra found herself replaying moments like puzzle pieces she didn't yet know how to fit together. A folded cardigan. A soft tone when he spoke to Jude. The fact that he hadn't once asked her last name. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't pity. It was something else. Something quiet. Something rare. She stood at Jude's door, watching him sleep, limbs tangled in Star Wars sheets, one sock missing. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. And in the hush between heartbeats, she whispered a question to the darkness. Who are you, Ethan Langford? Because whoever he was, he didn't feel like someone passing through. He felt like a chapter just beginning. Up 4, offer on the table. The third time she saw him, it wasn't at the diner. It was on her phone, an unknown number, a Chicago area code, blinking on the screen while she stood behind the register at closing, hands sticky with syrup and a headache brewing behind her eyes. She almost didn't answer. She didn't have room in her day for more nonsense. But something in her gut told her to press the green button. Hello? There was a pause. Then a voice, familiar now, low, controlled. Miss Monroe, it's Ethan Langford. She blinked, confused. Hi, how did you get this number? Rosie gave it to me. I hope that's all right. She exhaled slowly, already making a mental note to yell at Rosie later. What's this about? I'd like to offer you a job. She almost laughed. I already have one. I like this. There was silence. Then, as if he could hear her hesitation through the static, he added, Remote onboarding support. Full training provided. $72,000, 0 cents to start. Full benefits. Work from home, flexibility. It would let you stay near your son. The number hit her like a wind gust. That was more than she'd ever made, more than she'd dreamed of making. It sounded fake, like a scam. Why? She asked bluntly. Why me? He was quiet for a beat. Because I think you're capable, and because I think your son deserves to grow up seeing that capability recognized. Her throat tightened. This feels like pity. It's not. Then what is it? An investment. An investment in what? He didn't hesitate. And someone the world has overlooked for too long. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, the job offer open on her cracked laptop, the glow flickering like a campfire against her cheek. Mabel watched her from the stove, silent, stirring tea leaves in a chipped mug. I don't get it, Sierra murmured. People like him don't hire girls like me. Maybe he's not people like him, Mabel replied. Sierra looked down at the contract again. The numbers were real. The signature at the bottom, Ethan J. Langford, real. The offer had no catches, no ultimatums. Just one line that stuck in her throat like honey turning hard. You can decline, but I hope you don't. She didn't say yes. Not yet. But 2 days later, she was standing in front of a mirrored elevator wall at a downtown Chicago building, holding her breath, like it might disappear if she exhaled too loud. When the doors opened, she found herself face to face with a man she didn't recognize. Tall, older than Ethan, colder somehow. He extended a hand. Derek Langford. Her heart skipped. Brother. I'm here to see Ethan, she said. He's in meetings. She followed him down a hallway of glass and metal and air that smelled like wealth. Every corner gleamed, every person they passed looked polished and important and fast. She felt like a child in a stranger's living room. Inside a conference room, Derek dropped a folder on the table between them. I'll be blunt, he said. I don't know what you are to my brother, but we don't do charity hires. Sierra blinked. Excuse me? You're a waitress from a town no one's heard of, no degree, no experience, and yet you're being offered a position we usually reserve for top candidates. You tell me. What exactly are we hiring here? Her pulse roared in her ears. She stood. You don't know me, she said, voice sharp, and you don't get to decide what I'm worth. Derek didn't flinch. But something in his eyes changed. I'll take the job, she added, not because your brother is offering it, because I earn the right to something better. And I'm not afraid of proving you wrong. She walked out without waiting for his reply. The first week was hard. The second was brutal. But by the third, Sierra was waking up at 5 a.m., setting Jude up with cereal and cartoons, and logging into orientation calls before most of her town even stirred. The learning curve was steep, but she climbed it. Quietly, fiercely. By the end of the month, she'd memorized the scripts, nailed 2 test calls, logged her first client training session with 0 errors, and on payday, when the deposit hit, she cried. Not because she'd never seen that much money, but because for the first time in years, she didn't have to count it 3 times to make sure it would stretch. Jude noticed the difference too. New shoes, a bookshelf he helped build, a nightlight that worked every time, and a mom who smiled a little easier. She didn't see Ethan again until a Thursday afternoon. She'd just finished a Zoom call and stepped out for groceries when a sleek black car pulled to the curb. He got out like he wasn't made of glass and suits and legacy. He held a brown bag and a paper cup.
I figured you might like real coffee for once. She raised an eyebrow. You tracked me down for caffeine? I missed your section at the diner. Rosie's heartbroken. He offered the cup, she took it. It was exactly how she liked it. Of course it was. You still think this isn't pity? She asked. I think you're afraid to let someone believe in you. He said it softly, not like an accusation, but like a truth that had been waiting in the air between them since the first spilled cup. She looked at him, long and slow. I don't need saving. I never said you did. Then what do you want? I didn't blink. To help you build whatever comes next. And somehow, despite the job, despite the history, despite everything, she believed him, not because he made promises, but because he didn't.
Touched her eyes. The DNA connection. He hadn't meant to touch the photo. It was just lying there, face up on Sierra's cluttered kitchen counter during a remote check-in visit. A small square, grainy, half-crumpled under a stack of worksheets and art supplies. The boy in the picture was laughing, eyes squinting, teeth missing in that beautiful, awkward, second-grade kind of way. But it wasn't the smile that stopped Ethan. It was the curve of the jaw, the arch of the eyebrow, the angle of the chin. He'd seen that face before, in a mirror, in a casket. In the ultrasound image he still kept locked in the back of a drawer, dated 8 years ago, with the words Baby Langford written in fading ink across the top. He picked it up slowly, as if it might burn him. Sierra walked into the room holding 2 glasses of lemonade and froze. Her voice came out flat. That's Jude. He was 6 there. Ethan didn't say anything. He couldn't. Because all at once his carefully ordered world tilted a slow, nauseating tilt, and the truth he'd refused to think about came roaring back. His son. The one who never took a breath. The one who never had a name. The one he lost before he even got to hold him. What if? No, it couldn't be. Sierra narrowed her eyes. Is something wrong? Ethan set the photo down like it was glass. Nothing, he said quietly. He just looks familiar. She didn't answer. But she was watching him now, too closely. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. Sat in his penthouse, the lights off, the city glittering beneath him like a broken constellation. He replayed every interaction, every sentence Jude had said, every glance, every reflex. The way the boy had laughed at a coding pun. The way he tilted his head when deep in thought. The way he moved his hands when explaining something fast, purposeful, a little too sharp. Just like, no, he shook the thought away. But it didn't leave. Oberastrom thought. It clung to him, burrowed deep. He picked up the phone. Get me a contact at the Illinois Genetic Registry. He wasn't proud of it. Swabbing Jude's water bottle while Sierra was distracted in the other room. He told himself it was precaution, a ghost hunt, nothing more. But when the results arrived 5 days later, he couldn't breathe. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. He sat at his desk for hours, the report trembling in his hands. Jude Monroe wasn't just some brilliant kid from a small town. He was his son. The one who never had a chance. The one no one told him existed. And Sierra. Sierra had kept that secret. He told himself not to be angry. He had no right. But grief makes you greedy. And the moment he knew, something inside him cracked wide open. Sierra found the envelope a week later.
Not at her home, not in her email, but at the diner, tucked inside her locker with no note. She opened it between shifts, the paper smelling faintly of cologne and panic. At first, it didn't register. The language was clinical. The numbers cold, but then she saw the name. Langford, Ethan, Monroe, Jude. She stared at it until the words blurred, her hands shaking so hard the page fluttered to the floor. He knew, and he hadn't come to her. He hadn't asked. He hadn't looked her in the eye. He had swabbed her child's DNA like he was inspecting a product on a shelf. Her stomach turned. She grabbed her coat and walked out. He was in the middle of a quarterly report meeting when she burst through the doors. His assistant tried to stop her. She didn't even blink. Ethan stood when he saw her, startled, cautious. She didn't speak. She just walked up to his desk, pulled the envelope from her coat, and dropped it onto the polished wood, like a verdict. "Is this what you do?" she asked, voice trembling. "Run tests behind people's backs? Treat children like assets?" He opened his mouth, but she didn't let him speak. "You had a question, and instead of asking the one person who had the answer, you went behind my back, you violated my son's privacy, you violated me." "Sierra." "No," she snapped. "You don't get to say my name like it means something. You had a choice. You chose control. You chose power. I'm done with men like you." He stood, eyes wide. "I just wanted to know. I lost a son. I thought, you don't get to take mine just because you lost yours." She turned, walked out. They didn't look back. But she didn't see the way Ethan crumpled the moment the door shut. Didn't see the way he sat in that chair for hours, staring at nothing. Didn't hear the voice inside him whisper over and over. The answer, "I already lost him once."
Chapter 6. He knew all along. She didn't speak to him for 9 days. Not because she wanted to punish him, but because she didn't trust herself to speak without bleeding. Each time the phone lit up with his name, each time he knocked, emailed, tried, she silenced the noise like a woman in mourning. And she was mourning. Not the lie, but the ruin of something she'd let herself hope for. Mabel didn't press, just poured her tea and gave her silence to sit inside. But Jude noticed. He always did. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked one night, curled up on the couch beside her, his voice barely louder than the ticking clock. "Baby." "Then why does your heart sound sad again?" She blinked. "Hard. I'm just tired." "Did the robot man go away?" She didn't correct him, didn't say Ethan's name. It just nodded. And Jude, sweet child that he was, whispered, "I hope he comes back. I think he liked us." Ethan didn't sleep. Not for days. Not because he didn't try, but because sleep meant silence, and silence meant remembering, and remembering meant facing the look on Sierra's face when she realized what he'd done. He wanted to fix it. But he'd built his life around fixing things with power and precision. And she didn't want power. She wanted trust. He didn't know how to give that, not without trembling. So he did the only thing he could. He waited. It was Jude who changed everything. Not intentionally, but with one act so small, so painfully innocent, it fractured the rest of Ethan's restraint. The boy had sent him a letter, written in green crayon, folded into a dinosaur envelope. Ethan found it on the lobby floor of his building, hand-delivered by Sierra's niece, who worked as a courier part-time. "I drew you something," it said. "Mom said you're gone, but I don't want you to be. I think you miss people when they fit in your heart and then leave it. I miss you like that." Beneath it was a drawing of 3 stick figures. A boy, a woman, a tall man in a green cardigan. Underneath was one line. "Please come back if you still love us." He drove that night.
Didn't tell his driver, didn't call ahead. Just got behind the wheel and followed the map he knew by heart now. Out of the city, down the long winding roads, past the split oak tree and the gas station that still sold fried dough at midnight. The farmhouse lights were off when he arrived. But he waited. Morning broke with gold cracks across the horizon. Sierra stepped onto the porch in a sweatshirt and bare feet. She didn't look surprised, didn't look angry, just tired. Why are you here? Because I miss you, like that. She didn't answer. He stepped forward. Is wrong. She said nothing. I was afraid of what it meant, of losing him. Her eyes glistened. You never had him, she whispered. I know, he swallowed. But I want to. Not out of guilt, not because I lost a child, because he's mine, because he's yours, and because somewhere between all of this, I realized I never wanted to walk away again. Her voice broke. You lied to me. I did. You hurt me. Oh. Silence fell between them like fog. Then he said quietly, please let me fix the one thing I never thought I could. She looked at him, every wall inside her shaking. And still, she didn't move, didn't reach, didn't run. But she didn't close the door either. And that was enough.
Chapter 7. Storm in the Hospital. It started with a cough. Small, harmless, something a teacher might ignore and a mother might kiss away. But by nightfall, Jude was curled up in a ball on the couch, fleshed and wheezing. His small frame shook every time he tried to breathe. Sierra pressed a cool cloth to his forehead, whispering lullabies with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. His fever kept climbing. Then 105. When his lips started to turn pale and his fingers twitched, she didn't even grab a jacket. She just wrapped him in the green cardigan Ethan once left behind and ran into the storm, keys rattling, prayers spilling from her lips like pennies into a wishing well. The ER smelled like antiseptic and urgency. She stood alone under the flickering lights, clutching Jude to her chest, whispering to him between sobs. The nurse took one look and called it fast track, immediate room. Trouble breathing? Spiking fever? We need fluids. Now! They wheeled him away. Her knees nearly buckled. She didn't call Ethan. She didn't need to. He showed up anyway. No umbrella, no assistant, no polished composure. Just rain in his hair, panic in his eyes, and Sierra's name on his lips. Where is he? He asked, breathless. She looked up from the plastic chair in the hallway. You're not supposed to be here. I know. She stared at him, exhausted, broken. But when the doctor said only 2 can go in, she didn't stop him. They stood side by side beside Jude's bed as he fought for every breath. Ethan touched the boy's hand lightly, like a prayer. Little genius, he whispered. It's me. I'm here. Jude stirred. Hard-covered man. Ethan's voice cracked. Still wearing it, buddy. Sierra turned away. Because watching Ethan cry, silent, real tears was harder than watching her son struggle to breathe. Hours passed like years. The machines beeped. The storm raged against the windows. The doctor returned just before dawn. It was broken. Oxygen's up. He's stable now. Sierra collapsed into the nearest chair and wept into her hands. Ethan sat beside her. Didn't speak. Just held her. And for the first time in her adult life, she didn't have to hold herself together.
Later, in the quiet hush of recovery, Jude slept beneath a warm blanket, color returning to his cheeks. Sierra and Ethan sat beside him, legs brushing under the small plastic couch. I didn't call you, she said softly. I know. You came anyway. He looked at her, tired and unguarded. I'll always come. She didn't reply. but her fingers reached for his and didn't let go.
Chapter 8. The Dinner Table Test. The scent of chicken and rosemary filled the farmhouse like a song. Not a loud one, something quieter. A hum beneath the bones, the kind of warmth Sierra used to think only belonged in someone else's life. She stirred the gravy slowly, watching Jude from the kitchen window. He was in the yard, swinging a stick like a sword, narrating his own adventure. Ethan sat on the porch steps, watching with the kind of smile that didn't need to be seen to be felt. Grandma Mabel leaned against the fridge. "You gonna ask him to stay for supper, or let that man starve on pride?" Sierra didn't answer right away. She tasted the gravy, swallowed, then nodded once. Mabel smirked. "Took you long enough." They ate by candlelight, not for romance, but because the power had flickered twice that afternoon and no one wanted to risk the lights going out over dry biscuits. Jude talked non-stop. About school, about his telescope project, about how one of the kids in his class said his mom was cooler than a science teacher. Ethan laughed. Not a polite, reserved sound, but a real one, unlocked and warm. He asked Jude questions, listened to the answers, and never once looked at his phone. Sierra watched all of it in silence, trying to memorize the shape of the room, the feel of the air, the way Ethan reached for the salt like he belonged there. Because he did. He belonged there. After dinner, Jude brought out a board game, one Sierra hadn't played in years, and insisted Ethan join them. He did, of course. He even let Jude win, not by losing, but by pretending to be worse at strategy than he really was. Sierra saw right through it. So did Jude. But no one said anything. Not until later, when Sierra was doing dishes and Ethan stood beside her, drying plates like he'd done it 1,000 times. He glanced at her, towel in hand. "Is it always like this? With this much peace?" She paused. "Not always?" He nodded, then added softly, "Then I'll take what I can get." When he moved to leave, Jude stopped him. Ran down the hallway in socks and a too big sweater, holding something in his hand. "Drawing?"
3 stick figures. One labeled Mom, one Jude. The third, he held it out shyly. "This is you," he said. "I gave you eyebrows this time." Ethan chuckled, kneeling down. "I look very serious." Ugh. Ethan folded the drawing carefully like it was made of glass. "Can I ask you something?" Jude whispered. "Anything." Jude looked up. "Can I call you Dad?" The question landed like thunder in a still room. Ethan's eyes shimmered. Sierra behind them felt her heart stop. He didn't rush the answer. He touched Jude's shoulder gently. "Only if it feels right to you." Jude nodded. "It does." Ethan looked up at Sierra. She didn't speak? I didn't cry. But she didn't stop it either. In that silence, that permission was more powerful than anything words could give.
Chapter 9. The Mother Returns. It was the kind of day that felt like a second chance. The annual harvest picnic had always been a bittersweet event for Sierra, filled with food stands, hay rides, laughter, and 1,000 tiny ghosts. She used to watch families crowd the square, parents fussing over sticky hands and crooked ponytails, and wonder how it felt to belong so easily. But this year was different. Jude ran ahead, chasing leaves in a new hoodie Ethan had bought him, navy blue, with the words Langford Robotics Camp embroidered on the sleeve. He carried a caramel apple in one hand and a hand-drawn treasure map in the other, declaring he would uncover buried secrets. Sierra laughed, shaking her head. Ethan walked beside her, hands in his pockets, looking at the town like someone trying to memorize its heart. They felt okay. Like people healing. Like a family beginning. Until she saw the woman in the cardigan. She was standing near the pie table, looking out of place. Too polished, too still. Her hair was the same, curled and pinned, and her eyes. Sierra knew those eyes better than she wanted to. Claire Monroe. Her mother. Sierra froze. Ethan noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Claire turned, as if sensing her, and the years melted instantly. She looked older, smaller. But her presence still carried weight. And she stepped forward. Slowly. "Sierra?" Just the sound of it made Sierra flinch. It had been 8 years since she heard her mother say her name. 8 years since she was told to pack her shame and leave. Now here she was, holding a paper plate and a look of quiet desperation. "I saw the newsletter," Claire said. "Jude won the science award. I thought, maybe I could say congratulations." Sierra didn't respond. Didn't move. Claire glanced at Ethan, then back at her daughter. "You look so much like you did at that age." Sierra swallowed. "You don't know what I looked like at that age. You weren't there." Claire's voice cracked. "I know." "I needed you," Sierra whispered. "I was 17, and you let him throw me out like I was garbage. I didn't know how to stop him." "You didn't try?" "I was scared." I. They stood there, surrounded by laughter and music and fall leaves. Sierra's hands were shaking. "I don't expect forgiveness," Claire said quietly. I came to see him, even if only from a distance." Ethan stepped back, giving them space without disappearing. Jude returned just then, face bright. "Mom, I found the gold coin." Claire looked down at him and gasped softly. He blinked up at her. Sierra held her breath. "Hi," Jude said. "Are you new?" Claire knelt, careful, like she was approaching a sacred thing. "Yes, I suppose I am." He smiled. "Do you want to see my map?" Sierra almost told him no. Almost grabbed his hand and walked away. But something in her mother's face, in the tears that didn't fall but brimmed anyway, stopped her. Claire stood slowly. "You raised a beautiful boy." "I didn't do it alone," Sierra said, eyes shifting to Ethan. Claire's lips trembled. "I'm glad you had someone." Sierra didn't say, "It wasn't always like that." And say, "I did the hard years alone." She didn't need to. Because Claire knew. And for once, she didn't look away. She held the truth between them like a gift she was too late to wrap, but desperate to offer anyway. Later, back at the farmhouse, Sierra sat on the porch steps with Ethan beside her and Jude asleep upstairs. Mabel brought cocoa, said nothing, and went back inside. Sierra stared at the stars. "She said she came to his school play," she murmured. "Said she sat in the back row." Ethan turned toward her. "Do you believe her?" "I think I do." He was quiet. "I'm not ready," she added. "Not yet." "You don't have to be." She looked at him, eyes soft. "You know what today felt like? One page I never thought I'd get to turn." He nodded, understanding in his bones. "Then turn it slow," he said. "I'll still be here." And somehow, she believed him. Not because he said it, but because he already had been. Chapter 10. My Son's Father. The school auditorium smelled like pencil shavings and pride. Folding chairs lined the gym floor. Glitter banners spelled Springfield Youth STEM Showcase. Parents whispered in anticipation, and a slideshow looped on the projector, with pictures of smiling kids beside poster boards, and little robots that wobbled and beaked. Sierra sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly. Ethan sat beside her. He wasn't dressed like a CEO today. No pressed suit, no bodyguard outside, just jeans, a button-down, and a smile he hadn't worn in years. When Jude's name was called, the crowd clapped, and he ran on stage in a tiny blazer, bow tie askew. He stood behind the podium, barely reaching the mic. "Hi, I made a thing that helps kids who are scared of the dark sleep better. It's solar-powered. It adjusts to your heartbeat. My mom helped me stay brave long enough to build it, and my dad, he helped me believe I could." Sierra's breath caught. Jude hadn't said those words before. Not out loud. Not like this. She turned slowly. Ethan was frozen, eyes wide, hand pressed to his mouth. The audience clapped again, unaware of the history cracking open in that single sentence. Jude ran off stage and into Ethan's arms. "You did it," Ethan whispered. Jude grinned. "I said it out loud this time." Sierra wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. His son had given him a title. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. That evening, they sat on the back porch. Mabel had gone inside. The sun had dipped behind the horizon. Jude had fallen asleep on the couch, with his award clutched in one hand and a melted popsicle stick in the other. Sierra leaned against the railing, barefoot, silent. Ethan stood beside her, watching the sky go from lavender to navy. Then he reached into his pocket, not for a ring, but for a small key. He didn't say anything at first, just held it out in his palm, open and still. "What's that?" she asked. "My father left me a house," he said, "just outside the city. I never went back after he passed. Never thought I'd have a reason to, but it's got a backyard, a real fireplace, room for a telescope, and 3 bedrooms." She blinked. "I don't expect anything," he added. "Not promises, not answers, just, if you're ever ready to write the next chapter, together, I'd like to offer a beginning." She looked down at the key. It wasn't fancy. No diamonds, no ribbon. But just a key, and a small metal charm attached. A star. Jude's star. The same shape he always drew. Sierra's breath hitched. "You're serious," she whispered. "I want to come home, if you'll have me." She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward. She wrapped her fingers around his, closed both hands around the key, and leaned her forehead against his chest. Inside the farmhouse, Jude stirred. Eyes half closed, he looked out the window and saw them. His mom. His dad. The stars above them shining quietly like maybe, just maybe, they weren't so lonely anymore. He smiled and drifted back to sleep. Love that stayed. It was still early when Sierra woke. The kind of early where the sky is a soft gray and the air smells like yesterday letting go. She walked barefoot into the kitchen, made coffee without thinking, and paused when she saw the green cardigan folded neatly on the back of the chair. The same one that held her child through fevers, caught her tears when no one else would. Now, worn by the man who stayed. Ethan was already outside. He never said much in the mornings. But when she joined him on the porch and handed him the coffee, he smiled like it was the only thing in the world that made sense. Behind them, Jude slept soundly, the science fair trophy still beside his bed, and a nightlight blinking steady against the shadows. They didn't talk about the years lost, or the things broken. They talked about the new telescope coming in the mail, about planting a garden, about how fall felt less like an ending now and more like a soft beginning. "You think people can get it right the second time around?" Sierra asked, resting her head on Ethan's shoulder. He kissed her hair. "Nor did I. But I think people who survive the worst parts of love learn how to make it last." They stayed there as the sun lifted slow and golden behind the fields. 3 people. And family. No last names required. Just a porch swing, a rising sky, and love that never asked for perfection, only presence. And some love stories start with fireworks. But the ones that stay, they began with forgiveness, with a coffee shared in silence, with a child's hand and a key held out in hope. If you've ever been left behind, if you've ever carried a child through a world that didn't clap for you, if you've ever thought, maybe I'll never be chosen, not fully, not loudly, not all the way, then let this story remind you. You are not forgotten. You are not unlovable. And yes, a kind of love that stays still exists. It shows up with no spotlight. It asks for nothing loud. but when it holds your hand, it never lets go. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in second chances, or someone who needs to believe again. Because sometimes, the stories we pass along are the very ones that save us.